Hi! This is my video for historical context of humans in research. Um, First, I think we have to go into the possible benefits of the study. And first with the Tongsi uh, syphilis study, um, the intent of the study was positive. I don't think it was intended to be racist based on one source that said the differences in the rate of syphilis could be explained by differences in their respective social and economic status. That's a quote. Um, and the study did provide benefits for the men involved, such as free healthcare and free meals. And then in the case of Henrietta Lacks and the HeLa cells, there were many benefits, saved millions of lives, helped a lot of people. Um, without her cells, we wouldn't have polio vaccines. This helped moved along cancer studies, cloning experiments. Um, a huge portion of scientific discoveries can also be linked to HeLa cells. It's been really impactful. However, these steps of progress did come with side effects and harms. So in the case of the Tongsi study, it was meant to last for 9 months, but ended up lasting for 40 years, and it caused harm to generations. Um, so, for example, if one of these the men who had syphilis, they infected their wives, could pass it down to their kids. This knowingly could have been stopped if they had been told that they had syphilis or told what their study was about. Um, Syphilis is also can be seen as very shameful, or at least it was, which was really hard and challenging for these families. And no one got the treatment that they needed because they weren't able to consent. Um, in the terms of Henrietta Lacks, she ended up not being able to pay for healthcare. Her family couldn't pay for healthcare. She never received benefits for the contributions that she made, and she was never asked for her permission to give and make this contribution, which has been controversial and raised the whole question of, not the question, but the complaint that she isn't just this source of cells, she's a person, which is why it's been brought up so recently. And then the next question, were the human participants able to consent to their involvement in the study? If yes, what factors would influence their participation? So in the Tongsi study, the people were not able to consent. Yes, they did give their verbal consent, and yes, they were competent to consent. However, they didn't know the nature of the study. They were extremely misled. They were told that it was something about bad blood and believed that they were just getting free healthcare. So this violates the principle of adequate disclosure and adequate understanding. These people didn't know what they were getting themselves into. They weren't told. Therefore, they couldn't consent. In the case of Henrietta Lacks, she never gave her permission for people to take her cells and use her cells. So she wasn't able to consent at all. There was no consent. That's one of the most important principles of consent, that you are able to verbally give your consent, and that's usually expressed in the form of a legal signature. And without this most foremost principle, consent, she certainly didn't consent at all. How were the study's participants of the study chosen? Were they chosen fairly? I think yes. Henrietta Lacks, she didn't have a choice to participate, so I don't think this principle applies as much because it wasn't a study of a group of people, and she didn't ask to participate. In the case of the Tongsi study, I think it was. They were all black men chosen from the same area, and I don't think poverty, education, or religion was a discriminatory factor in this case. Common themes. What common themes? Anything repeat itself? Well, in both cases, the participants were not able to consent, because in Henrietta Lacks' case, she didn't know that she was contributing, and in the case of the Tongsi study, they didn't know what they were contributing in. So in both cases, consent was not involved. And yeah, this would definitely be considered unfair. But in both cases, I don't think justice was an issue either. I think also in both cases, the families of the people involved were impacted. I think in Henrietta Lacks's case, it discussed how the family could still not afford healthcare and how Henrietta was buried in an unmarked grave. Well, not anymore. But that definitely had a huge impact on the family, which was talked about a lot and emphasized a lot. And the same was true with the Tunksy study, as I mentioned. This could have negative health effects on generations, up to 3 generations of people, which all could have been stopped if they were aware of the contents of the trial that they were participating in. And next, video response questions. So this is commenting on the video. Are these participants? Oh, yeah. So yes, there are a lot of gaps. In my personal opinion, I think almost every principle was violated. So I don't think any of the principles. Yeah. So in terms of autonomy, you can't make an autonomous decision if you aren't able to consent and you don't understand the nature of the decision that you're making, and that's true for both Henrietta Lacks and for the Tunksy study. Beneficence and non-maleficence were both harmed because for beneficence, there was a way to help these people in the Tunksy study. There was a way to make sure that they were to cure them of their disease, especially once penicillin was made common use. In Henrietta Lacks's case, I think it's a little bit more tricky because it's hard because it was beneficial to a lot of people that her cells were used. But I think the most important principle is autonomy and how neither of these participants had the ability to consent. And in both cases, this principle was definitely violated and led on to a huge fight for trying to get justice for that family. And then obviously beneficence is really, really important because of the whole issue that more could have been done for all of the participants. And next, I think I'm going to talk about the principles of bioethics for the Tunksy syphilis study. So in this case, there's autonomy, and for autonomy, in the Tunksy study, the participants of the study voluntarily decided to join. However, they were not able to consent because they didn't understand the nature of the study, so they didn't have adequate understanding or adequate disclosure, which if you can't consent, then you are unable to make an autonomous, informed decision. So this principle was absolutely violated. In the principle of non-maleficence, there were so many repercussions and harmful side effects as a result of these people not understanding their conditions, even though the people who were conducting the experiment had the ability to tell the participants what exactly they were enduring and could have saved their family and their grandchildren from suffering. As for beneficence, yes, the intent of the experiment was positive. It was beneficent in the way that it was designed to help understand the why the rate of syphilis was higher in Black communities and what happened when syphilis was left untreated. However, and this didn't really work out because it ended up really, really harming a lot of men and their families. As for justice, I do think that the people in this experiment were chosen fairly. And as for distribution of resources, that I think that would be applied here. However, I guess you could argue that the men did not have access to the penicillin that would have cured their syphilis like the rest of society did, which they absolutely deserved, and they were denied, and they were not aware that they needed. So that is violating the principle of justice. And then I think for the video response questions, I wasn't sure if I was supposed to talk about in terms of the principles of bioethics or as the principles of the of I'm forgetting what it's called, but respect for persons. Yeah, but I think that answers all of those questions. So thank you.